I drove the gambler car in 1983, and then I got fired. And the reason they fired me was they hired me to win the World of Outlaw Championship and to win the Knoxville Nationals, and I ran second in both. So really, I had no kick. They hired me to win, you know. That's what they said. Well, I didn't win, so you should be gone.
Green flag in the air.
Well, everyone, it's the week we all wait for. If you're a sprint car fan, it is officially Knoxville Nationals week, and I'm really excited about the guest that I have for this week. This guy won this race 5 times. Yes, he's a 5-time Knoxville Nationals champion, 2-time Kings Royal winner. He has 140 World of Outlaw wins, 39, I want to say, All-Star wins from back in the day when the All-Star Circuit of Champions was really big. And just he was part of the Big Three, for any of you that remember that, back with Steve Kinzer, Sammy Swindell, and, of course, our guest today, Doug Wolfgang. Really excited to have Doug on. I want to spend a set... I want to send a special thanks out first to Doug Wolfgang for getting together with me, but also to Todd Queering, Doug Johnson, and the entire Houston Speedway staff for letting me go down there and meet with Doug at their facility. They have a beautiful new office building there right on the property of Houston Speedway. Beautiful office and conference room, and we're able to get together with Doug there and have a great talk. Doug took some time out of his busy schedule to meet me up there, and we were able to get together that way. So really excited to get moving on that one. It is Knoxville Nationals week, everybody, so make sure you tune into that. I will be down at Knoxville trying to cover some stuff. Going to be helping out a guy down there, too. Everybody knows I kind of help Donnie Schatz in and out. So if you see me running around down there, feel free to give me a shout. Let me know. I love to put faces with names, and would just love to meet any of you. Would just love to meet any of you that are out there. Also, if you can help me out, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that share button. Help me get my content out there. That just gives me more options to get more information to you folks. And I love sharing these stories with you guys. With that, like I always say, let's not wait around. Let's talk to Doug Wolfgang. All right, so we have Doug Wolfgang sitting with us here today. And Doug, first of all, I want to tell you, thank you very much for putting up with me here, getting this thing set up, and taking some time out of your busy schedule, chasing grandkids and stuff around to come out and visit with us here at Hot Lappin' with Landman.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I also want to send a special thanks out to Todd Queering, Doug Johnson, everybody at Houston Speedway. We're actually out in the beautiful new facility office / shop of Houston Speedway. We're able to get together to get this show done. Doug, hate to say it, but you're a little behind on your technology. Phones,
No,
internet.
I'm not behind.
You're right where
I'm
you want to be.
lost.
Yeah. So no internet at Doug's house, no smartphone, stuff like that. So, hey, what's better? Have Landman come to you, and appreciate with the, like I said, putting up with me before we get started here.
No problem.
So let's start off to a lot of my listeners out there. You know, everybody knew Doug Wolfgang as a very successful sprint car driver, but it's been years now since you stepped away. And what have you been up to?
Well, for the first several years that I was done driving, I had a repair shop, a welding shop, but it really turned into a race shop where we built race cars and repaired race cars. And I did that until about 8 years ago, and then I just retired. I retired at 65, and I'm now 73, so about 8 years ago. And at that point, at 65, that's all I had ever done my entire life, was either race or build race cars or repair race cars. So I had a long enough run, I thought, my own mind, and I wasn't mad at racing. I wasn't mad at nothing. I just thought that my wife and kids and now grandkids had lived enough of their life being second to what I wanted to do, that I just decided at that point I would probably just put them first, and that's what I've been doing.
And I know I'm just about a generation behind you there. You had Robbie there kind of in between where I would have fallen. But I know as you got out of it and you'd had the grandkids going, it was nice because I got to spend time with you, with my oldest boy playing against, I think, one of your older grandchildren playing basketball in the good old ESD here in South Dakota. And we get to see each other a couple times a year and spend some time at the basketball games. And I can appreciate with what you're saying about spending time with family.
Yeah, it became very important to me, and the longer I did it, the more important it has become. So I'm lucky too, because I got I raced all those years and was gone a lot, and I still have the same wife, and we have 4 kids and 8 grandkids, and we have a full life chasing everybody around and keeping it together. So it's a lot of fun. Every day we're doing something.
Yeah. And that's what you're supposed to do when you get to retire. So I want to talk a little bit about, you had an amazing career, I'd say blessed, had a lot of hardship in the sprint car racing too, but a great way to make a living. And jumping back, I think one of the stories that I've been told about you is tell me about your very first ever experience taking a race car to a racetrack. And it may not have been to a track that was actually having an open competition that night.
Well, that was a long time ago. I think I was probably 18 years old, and I worked after high school, after the school day was over, and throughout the summer for Daryl Dolly, a local sprint car racer, but he was an automatic transmission man by trade. And he lived down about 2-3 blocks from my parents' house, and of course I hung around there because I liked racing. I could care less about automatic transmissions. Actually, I don't even like being a mechanic. But I liked racing. I liked hanging around. And I started hanging around working for him. And finally, Daryl had a really good modified car that raced at Jackson and Fairmont, Minnesota in the middle to late 60s. In fact, he won the championships over there a couple times. Well, he progressed to a sprint car, and they raced Knoxville, Iowa on Saturday night because it was about the only place at that time that raced real sprint cars. And that would have been about like maybe 1970, 69, 70, 71, right in there. And I worked for little or nothing. And one of the perks I got for working for him was he let me, if I wanted to bolt all the parts together on it, because it was all in pieces, I could put his old modified together and take it to Jackson, Minnesota. So we got it all together. And before we even went over there, there was this racetrack out on the east side of town called Sioux Speedway, not too far from right where we're at, Houston Speedway, about 4 or 5 miles away. And of course, it hadn't been run on much at all, but it wasn't growed up to weeds. They had raced a race or two on it in the last couple of years, and we took the race car out there and made a few laps with it out there. And I think the one thing I remember the most is there was like a oxygen acetylene bottle laying on the ground that we didn't know about up on the high side of the racetracks. They must have been working on something and ran out of gas or something and just switched it and just laid it on the ground or whatever. Well, I came along after a few laps and hit that thing and spun that thing in a million circles, but it didn't hurt the race car much. So, or any.
Okay, so now another thing that and you're going to have to confirm this for me or not, but growing up, I think you had a pretty good buddy that went by the name of Doug Clark also. Was that in your younger childhood days also?
Yeah, we all grew up in the same neighborhood right down there near Dolly's transmission. And we were all into racing because we grew up before Dolly was even in business. There was a place called Pete's Welding, and they used to work and keep Harold Petrie's number 39 modified car down there in those days. And Harold's a past champion here at Houston Speedway. And so, from as far as I can remember, back, we all were race fans. All my friends were, and our moms and dads took us to the Houston Speedway on Sunday night, and that's just what you did. And in the sun, of course, in those days there was nothing else going on. There wasn't baseball and pro baseball or semi-pro or basketball. You look forward. You lived for the Sunday afternoon where you could get ready to go to the racetrack, and that's what we all did in those days.
Yeah.
So, to for me, there was never a doubt in my mind. That's the only thing I ever wanted to be, was a race driver.
So tell us a little bit about from what I could digging through on some notes and stuff. And I see that you tell me if this is correct. You first started with a guy named Dave Van Patten, maybe in the mid 70s. Is that correct?
Well, it close, but wasn't the first car I started driving, sprint car wise. I raced around here and I got to be okay. And a guy from Sioux City at the time, a Chevrolet dealer, Dick Morris, bought a sprint car, and he came up here to the last race of the season, I think, and he told me he got a sprint car and he was going to the Western World Championships in the middle of October or late October in Phoenix. He wanted to know if I wanted to go along, I could, if I could help him on his car, I could go along. And boy, I couldn't wait for that. And he got this car from a place in Lincoln, Nebraska, Don Maxwell, who built sprint cars. He kind of was Speedway Motors. It was Don's business, but it was also Bill Smith's of Speedway Motors together. And he, anyway, we go out there to the races in Phoenix, and I totally was caught up in it. I mean, I was overwhelmed. I loved every minute of it. And I got back, and on the way back, he told me that Maxwell was looking for somebody to come to work down there. So of course I couldn't wait to call him on the phone, and he asked me, "Can you weld?" And I said, "Yes, of course I could weld," because I welded my own car together at the time, but it wasn't heliarc welding, and I'd never done aluminum stuff. So the stuff I did was very crude. And he said, do you know how to work a milling machine? And I said, of course, I told him, oh, heck yeah. I didn't even know what a milling machine was. Well, he said, well, I'll think about it. Well, a couple of weeks, a week passed, and he doesn't call me back. So I call him again. He said, well, I haven't quite made up my mind yet. So another week passed, and he hadn't called me. So I just drove down there one day uh, on a Monday morning, and I was there at the door when them guys got to work. And he said, well, I suppose we'll have to hire you if you were stupid enough to drive down here. So, and these jobs were, it was a race car shop. They built parts and front axles and radius rods and Nerf bars, and they built cars and they repaired stuff. Well, I hung around that rest of that fall and winter and through the spring, and a guy there in town had a spring front car, which most of the cars at that time were 4-bar torsion cars. And they had evolved past that already. And he had a spring front car that was a really nice car, and they wanted to know if I would drive it. And I said, heck yeah, because I'm not driving nothing else. I was driving a modified up here in town at the time. Well, we went to Knoxville, and on the first night, I ran second to Ray Lee Goodwin, who he drove for Speedway Motors. And the clear blue sky, and when I walked into the pit gate that night, there wasn't one person there that knew who I was. Not anybody, except for a few people.
Was that your first time ever to Knoxville Raceway?
Yeah, not ever to the racetrack. I'd been there with Dolly and stuff.
Okay.
Before that, but it's the first time I went there as a driver. And as far as people knowing about me, nobody knew who I was. They didn't know who I was, let alone if I drove or not. And I got second. So you know, and it was going to be a one-time. To make a long story short, it was a one-time shot car because they were going to sell it, and they ended up selling it to Dick Morris. So I went back and went to work at Maxwell's, and and I don't think much about it. I didn't. I had no idea that I was going to be any good at all. I didn't. I thought it was just luck. I didn't think much about it. Well, and of course, nobody called me, which that would be natural, you know. So the next Saturday night, I go down. I go to Knoxville on my own, and I was walking around, and I didn't have a car to drive, but I asked everybody there whether they had a driver or not. I walked up to him and said, I'm Doug Wolfgang. I'm the guy that runs second last week. I think I can win in your car, whatever my spiel was. I don't remember what it was. And of course, nobody hired me, which I wouldn't either. Well, Leonard McCarl was there with his own car, which he drove his own stuff. And Leonard had the flu or something. I can't really remember what it was, but he was sick to his stomach. And he qualified the car, and it was ready for the main event, but he was just sick. So I'm standing there, and he said, "Are you the guy that drove that car last week?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, get in here and drive this thing for the features." So I got in, and I think I ran third or fourth in his car. He had qualified it good. It had a big motor in it. Leonard had a good motor. It steered like a John Deere tractor, and wore me totally out. Uh, so the
Did you have
one
to start in
thing,
the back that night?
huh?
Did you
I
have to start
know.
in the back
I
that night?
think I started in the third row or somewhere.
Okay.
I don't, because the car was already qualified, and I don't even know if they knew I was in it. I'm not sure how that went, but I got third or fourth, and Leonard was happy with me, and we became friends for years after that. But it still didn't put me on Broadway. So in that summer, I think I drove 11 or 12 different race cars, and they were usually one or two times. And the guys would either run out of money or I'd crash them or whatever I did, and they didn't have enough money to build them back up. And that's just the way it started. And then so I'm still working at Maxwell's, and this fall comes, and the next spring rolls around, and Dick Morris went to driving for Bob Trussell, who his car was owned by Dave Van Patten, a mobile home dealer in Des Moines. Only Dick drove it a couple times in Florida and wherever all they went early in the spring, and he decided he wanted to drive his own car again, so he bought one from Maxwell. But he told Bob Trussell that if he was looking for a driver, he should try me. Well, Bob had kind of knew who I was because I'd run Knoxville most every Saturday night, and I didn't win any, but I ran up there and I was charging to the front or whatever when the motors blew up or whatever happened, or I crashed them, which I crashed a few times, and Bob called me and hired me to drive his car. And then he needed, Bob's built race cars too, so he was in direct competition with Don Maxwell,
Oh
and
yeah.
and Bob's welder quit, and by this time I had gotten to where I could heliarc all right, and Bob called over there and asked Maxwell if he'd mind if he hired me to drive and get me to come over and weld. And Maxwell said, no, he's going to quit anyway because he wants to be a driver.
Yeah.
He's not getting a chance. So that's how I got to drive for Dave Van Patten. He owned Bob Troxell's cars.
Okay. And then so that would have been like 1976 and 77 is what I had down. 77, it says you guys won like 45 different races that year. And I
Yeah.
believe that was in 77, I'm sorry. And that was your first ever Knoxville Nationals title also.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the Knoxville Nationals in 1977.
Well, and by this time, I had, my goal all the time was to be, as I got a little bit older and got into a race car, my goal then turned into being an IndyCar driver. because that's how in those days, that's how all the good Indianapolis drivers learned their trade. They learned it in sprint cars and in dirt cars, and then they got hired to drive an Indy car, and they all became millionaires and won the race and all this. And so that's what you're hoping as a kid. That's what my goal was. So in 1977, by that time I had a year's worth of experience, or 2 years worth. Well, 1975 the first year, and then 1976 with Bob Trossel, and in 76 we won 22 times, which was pretty good. I think it was the most of everybody in the Midwest. And at that time Jan Opperman was the premier outlaw sprint car driver in the country, and he got a job driving for Parnelli Jones at Indianapolis. And he was so good that he got a job driving an Indy car, and so, of course that's what I wanted to be. But anyway, he held the national record at that time of 44 main events in 1 year. And we started out that year, and we won a few races. In fact, we won several. And then it got to the point where we won every Saturday night at Knoxville, I think that year, except one. I think we won 10 times in a row before we got beat. And then I won a couple more before the Knoxville Nationals and won that. And by this time, it's only been 2 years, and by this time, everybody in the country knows who I am. They all think I'm good. Well, I'm not even really, in my own mind, I'm not even sure who I am, let alone if I'm any good. Yeah, I'm just a kid, 24, 5, whatever I was at the time. It happened fast. And I thought if I could win Knoxville, which I did, I'd get a call from Roger Penske the next afternoon, and he'd hire me to drive Indy cars. Well, I had no idea that Indy cars were even rear engine. I didn't pay no attention. They're all on blacktop. So I had absolutely, my thought, my dream was so far out of whack that I didn't really understand it. But about that time, the World of Outlaws started, and they start paying races started paying, instead of 4 and 500 to win, they started paying 2,000, and then 3,000, and 4 and 5, and on up. And now the one at Houston's paid 250, which is unbelievable. 300 next year.
Yeah.
So, it got to where I realized that I probably wasn't going to get in an IndyCar. So my goal was to be the best I could be. Not. I don't know if I ever thought I could be the best in the world, but I thought I wanted to be the best I could be. And it sounds like it was easy, but about that time, some guys showed up that I had barely even knew their name. Although I did know their names, I didn't know them yet. Guys like Ronnie Schumann, Danny Smith, Sammy Swindell, Steve Kinzer, and that group of guys all showed up. And to be the best I could be was a lot of times running fourth or fifth. They were so good.
And what year, what time session is this? It's like 78 when Ted started the Outlaw deal?
About 1978, right after the 77 season. And of course, I already had a reputation because I won the biggest race of sprint cars in the country, but I didn't, to show you how stupid I was, I didn't really know I had a reputation. I didn't know. I didn't pay no attention. I was just on to the next thing all the time.
Yeah.
And once I realized I was going to be a hired professional sprint car driver, and I'm thinking I'm going to be all right. I'm going to make pretty good money doing this. Steve and Sammy and the rest of them all showed up, and you had to work a lot harder at it than I thought it was going to be. And it never did. And it never changed after that. You just had to bear down.
Yeah. And so I just want to touch on that 1978 year. Also, you won your second Knoxville Nationals 2 years in a row. And like I said, going back to what I asked a little bit ago, how big a deal was the Knoxville Nationals? Was it still the mecca of sprint car racing back then?
Yeah, everything grows, and marketing and all that advertising makes it even bigger than ever. And of course, that stuff was unheard of in those days. But it was still the biggest, other than, it was the biggest sprint car event in the country. It only paid, I think it only paid 5,000 to win the first time. I'm not sure. It's been so
Yeah.
long ago, but it wasn't a lot of money. But compared to, the cars, you would only have maybe 4 or 5,000 in your car at that time. The motors were basically, stock Chevrolet engines, and you might put pop-up pistons or something in them, but you'd have to work at spending. In other words, the motors weren't 70,000 or nothing like that, and
Yeah.
the tires were $39, not 300, so it paid a lot less, but everything was a lot less comparatively so too. So, but for those days, it was still a big deal. They'd get 100 entries, and everybody made it seem like it was the mecca of dirt track racing right there.
Yeah.
On that Saturday night in August, it was the biggest deal.
Yeah. So 1980, 1982, through those 3 years, a gentleman by the name of Doug Howells, and I believe based out of North Dakota, telling me a little bit about how you got together with Doug, because I know he was probably as passionate about sprint car racing as you were.
Yeah, he was. He had Doug raced with Don Mack of East Grand Forks, North Dakota, and Don Mack was so good he could go. He won the Little 500 in Anderson, Indiana, on blacktop. He won the Florida 500 a couple times. He won lots of IMCA and unsanctioned, outlaw sprint car races. So he was well known and very good. But they lived in North Dakota, and Don was a farmer, and they didn't go every weekend to the biggest race of the weekend, no matter where it was yet. They were basically, you know, set up out of that area, the Fargo, Grand Forks area. And about that time, uh, in the 70s, we knew of, I knew of them and they knew of me, because we'd meet Sunday nights, a lot of Sunday nights at North Star Speedway in Minneapolis. They race sprint cars up there. And actually they probably knew of me because I think I won most of the time up there, a lot of times. I think Bob told me one time I won. I didn't always go, we didn't always go there at the time. We'd go other places, but I think 13 Sunday nights in a row that we were there, we won.
Yeah.
So, and they knew of me, and everybody, racing's a small world. So, everybody. And I looked up to Don Mack as one hero of mine. He was older than me and had won a lot of races. And anyway, Don got to the point where he couldn't go to races sometimes in the spring and fall because of planting or harvesting. And Doug would go somewhere, and he'd call me and ask me if I could come and drive his car, because he knew I drove a World of Outlaw car. And if there was a race, say at Hartford Speedway on Sunday night or somewhere like that, I'd go and race his car. And Doug's car was always, even though it wasn't the one I was running in World of Outlaws, it was always faster than the one I drove. Every time I drove it, I was faster in it. And we won some races. And as a couple of years passed, I raced it a few times, not very many, but a handful. And Don Mack decided to retire, and Doug's first phone call was to ask me if I wanted to drive it. And about that same time, I was still in 4X, and they decided that they didn't want to run all the World of Outlaw races, and Doug was chomping at the bit to go.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was natural. I went and drove his car, and we won a lot of races. We won, 25, 30 races a year for a couple of years.
Yeah, those 3 years, and I did see that you guys were actually the runner-up in the World of Outlaw points 2 of those 3 years, and so that tells me you're having a lot of success, and that probably goes back to when you might have started racing against Steve and Sammy and Schumann
Oh
and
yeah,
some of the other,
yeah,
big
they were
national
all
guys.
there. Yeah, and I know that for a fact because I can remember one of those years we won 20 some races, but I finished 18 times second to Steve Kinzer. So
Yeah,
I was sick of Steve already.
yeah, and that's the early '80s, huh? Long ways
Yeah,
to go.
yeah.
So, back then, right when I started getting really into the sprint car racing was about this time, early '80s. And back then, they had the good old Gambler house car. They had all these house cars and stuff like that. They had celebrities that were sponsoring them. I think Kenny Rogers and I think Loretta James or something like
No,
that. I'm not,
Loretta Lynn.
or yeah, Loretta Lynn. Thank you. Yeah. And so in '83, you drove the house car for the Gambler Racing Chassis, I assume is who that was.
Yep.
And Casey Spurlock was he the owner of that deal?
CK Spurlock was the
Or
owner.
CK? Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think you had like 11 wins that year too.
Yeah, we weren't as good that year, but we were all right. Yeah. Yeah.
So there was the Nance house car, there was the Gambler house car back then. I'm not sure what else it was, but it's weird that there are no longer house cars out there. It's just a random thought I'm throwing out there because it's like having the house car ride used to be kind of a big deal.
Well, I guess it did. I never thought of it that way. It was just that what they did was they took their own car and took it to the track to promote their business. So it
Yep.
was called the house car. Well, actually, I did the same thing in the '70s with Bob Trossel. Because
Okay.
if I won races, that's why Bob hired me because he thought I could win, and if I could win races, he was going to sell the hell out of cars.
Yeah,
So
and that makes sense. Yep.
yeah, and the more he sold, the more he could spend on his own race car.
Yeah.
So it was a kind of the more I'd win, the more I got paid back. I got
Yeah.
better parts on my car.
Yep. Well, that makes sense. And I never really
That's the
understood
same
that.
way it was with Gambler.
Yeah.
They would always, and Nance, they would always show what they had, you know, when they were starting to develop the race cars as time went on, little things changed every year, and they would promote those changes on their own house cars.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Definitely. So for some reason, you win 11 races with the Gambler house car. And at the end of the year, you guys part ways from what I could tell. But I think, and tell me
No,
if
we
I'm
didn't
wrong.
part ways. They fired me.
Okay. Okay. It doesn't say that, but so you got your walking papers, but probably my guess is a blessing in disguise because you end up out in central Pennsylvania. Bob Weikert either got a hold of you or you got a hold of him, and I'd be interested to hear how you and the Weikert group got together for that amazing was it a 4-year run?
Yeah, I drove the Gambler car in 1983, and then I got fired, and the reason they fired me was they hired me to win the World of Outlaw Championship and to win the Knoxville Nationals, and I ran second in both. So really, I had no kick. They hired me to win, you know. That's what they said. Well, I didn't win, so you should be gone. So anyway,
Man,
I get
that's
with
pretty
Laverne
brutal.
Nance over the winter.
Yep.
They called me because Sammy was doing something else or whatever. He had drove that car for a couple of years, and well, it was a good car at that time by '84. 83, 82, 83, 84, and I got in it in '84, and we only raced about till about May. In fact, we were out in Pennsylvania and New York when Laverne told me, you know what, this is not working out how I liked it. We weren't really killing it. We'd only won a few races, and it's costing a lot of money. And I got to get home and run my. So he wanted to take his car home, and I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" So I come home to Sioux Falls, and I no more than walk into the house. This is before cell phones. I walk in the house and Bob Weikert calls me on the phone and he wants me to drive 29, which that car had won races with Kenny Weld, Paul Pitzer, but mostly Kenny Weld in the past. So it was a formidable car, but it was an East Coast car. Here, you know, in the area of Williams Grove, Sealands Grove, Lincoln Speedway, Susquehanna, Hagerstown, Maryland, that area out there, which that's a huge area for sprint car racing still to this day, bigger than anywhere else in the country at that time. But they didn't run World of Outlaws, the traveling circuit. And I said, well, Bob, first of all, who's your mechanics? And they said, well, Davy Brown and Davy Brown Jr. and Senior. Well, I knew from, from being on this, out on the racing, that Davy Brown and his son knew what was going on. They had won a lot of races with a lot of different drivers and they knew what was going on. And so I thought that's all right, but I said, I don't want to run in Pennsylvania only. I want to run the big races. I want to run the Knoxville Nationals, the Eldora Nationals. I want to run the biggest races, Syracuse, and all them races. And he said, well, I have to think about it. So we just hung up and that's what it was. So I came back for about 2 or 3 weeks. I drove for Doug Howells again. And I could tell at that time that Doug's motors were outclassed at the time with wings on and bigger, softer tires, making more traction. His motors didn't seem to be the ones that you could win a big race in. And I was really interested in winning the big races. I mean, the little races paid a couple thousand to win or whatever. And if you could win one of those big races, 10, 15,000 or 20,000, you'd have to win 10 of them other ones to make that money up. So I just rather win a big race. And I could kind of tell his wasn't going to win a big race. So Bob Weikert called me on the phone again. He said, well, I decided that I will go out whenever, you want to go to a big race, we'll go, but we still race every weekend that you don't race a big race in Pennsylvania. I said, that's fine with me. I want to run all the time anyway. I just want to go to the big races. So I went out there and ran his race. I met him at Sharon Speedway in Hartford, Ohio, where Dave Blaney's from. And the first night I was a Wednesday night race, a 4,000 win all-star race, and we won it on the last lap. So I could kind of tell that night that I was clicking okay with these mechanics, and might work out. Well, so we raced that weekend, and I don't know what we did. I can't really remember if we did anything or not. I think I didn't do anything at Williams Grove on Friday night, but I think I won Port Royal on Saturday night, but I'm not sure. And then the next weekend, we were going out to the Kings Royal race, the first 50,000 to win sprint car race at Eldora Speedway. And I got fast time, but I think I told them guys wrong, and I messed it up myself for the main event, the setup. And I think we run fifth or something like that. But I could tell that we were going to be okay. And a couple weeks later, we won the Knoxville Nationals, and we won the Williams Grove Open, and later on, a couple months later, and we ended up winning 17 main events in that car that year, and the rest of that year, which I didn't start driving it until middle of July 18th, actually, because my oldest daughter's birthday is on July 18th, and I knew it was on her birthday.
Okay.
And then the following year, we won every big race they had, no matter where it was, and we won 55 main events.
Yeah, and that, like I said, that's crazy. I see the Knoxville Nationals and the Kings Royal that year. And
Williams
then
Grove Open.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was the first of, I think, 3 years straight that you won that deal too, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was, to those guys, their Knoxville Nationals was Williams Grove, because they lived in that area.
Yeah.
So they really got pumped up for that race, and that was a big deal for them.
Yeah, and especially in central Pennsylvania, and
Yeah.
that probably paid a little bit better than most of the other races out that way too.
Yeah, it did at the time. Now it's better, I think, too. Way better.
So so just curiosity, 84, 85. What year did you get married to Jerry?
We got married in 1973, January.
Okay, so you're living, are you still calling Sioux Falls home, or did you guys actually move out to PA for a couple of years?
No, we stayed in Pennsylvania for 1 year, but we never changed our address. It just got so busy and we raced so much. I never got home. And actually my daughters at the time were in grade school and we just kept them out there and went to grade school. But
Out in
that was a
Pennsylvania?
yeah,
Yeah.
1 year. But we
Okay.
still Sioux Falls was still our home.
Yeah. I just didn't know how the logistics of that being back and forth, especially with kids, and having a full-time ride based out of central
Well, we
Pennsylvania.
never came home from about when my kids got out of school on May 20th or whatever it was. They'd come out there and they never went back again until whatever Labor Day weekend, whenever school started.
So were you guys running around? Did you have your own motorhome by then or
We
anything like
had
that?
we had a mini home at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 4 years, and then I think, and you have to tell me, 88, you're out chasing World of Outlaw points again. And I think with Marks and Kepler. Is that sound accurate? And why did you get out of the Weikert car?
Well, Dave, Davy Jr. and me became real close, and we had a good combination going. And Davy Sr. built the motors, and he was there too. Well, Davy Jr.'s wife died in having a. They had a during childbirth. She had, and I don't know the name of the disease she had, but it was a blood disorder, and she died. And Davy's life got all messed up, and that was during the 1986 season, in July and August, right before the King's Royal in 86, I think. And or no, maybe it was 85. 85 season, and by 86 his life just got messed up. It's just the way it is, it's
Yep.
nobody's fault. It just happened. And by 1987 he was gone. He quit and did something else. Well, the team wasn't the same. And uh, and and we won 55 races in 85, 44 in 86, and 33 in 87. So it wasn't like we were starving winning. It
Yeah.
just wasn't the same. And by that time, after 3.5 years, 84, 5, 6, and 7, it was 22 hours to their shop at the 55-mile-an-hour speed limits in them days. I just got, I didn't I didn't come home very much, but I got tired. We were kind of outsiders out there in the East. They like their East Coast people, and I don't blame them. And I just got tired of the travel, of just being there. The team was different. It was starting to struggle, and before it went totally down, I just said, Bob, I'm out of here. I'm going to be. I gave him 2 months' notice. I told him before the season was even over in '87 that I was going to go back and live at home, and try to get a World of Outlaw car. And so I did. And the first one I got into was a car that Harold and Nett really owned, because it was a Challenger racing car, and it was called Dusmore Manufacturing. And Gary Stanton was going to run the racing program and run out. And then what happened in that car? That would have been the '88 season. We raced till about May again, and blew up a couple motors, and Stanton wanted to go home, and I don't blame him, because it wasn't that much fun. We were having trouble at the time and not winning all the time. And and I said he wanted to take a couple weeks off. Well, if you take a couple weeks off and reorganize, you're not going to win the championship. So I just said, you go home and hire somebody else, and I'll go do what I need to do. And about that time, Brad Doty quit driving for Marks and Kepler, uh, a number 18 car at the time, and they called me on the phone and they said, "Would you come and drive it? No questions asked. If you don't like it, leave, no hard feelings, and drive it until you feel like you don't want to be in it anymore." And so I came on a race to race basis and we won several races. I think we had trouble at Knoxville and something happened, so we had to start last in the A main, and I got third or fourth, I think, maybe fifth. I don't. I know it was in the top five, but I can't remember. So the car was all right. It won. It won. It did good. Uh, and But at the end of the year, I could kind of tell they were from California, and they kind of liked that, and they were, and I was I was a hillbilly, and I just needed to go do something more comfortable for me, so I did. And about that time, I think Deuce Turrell, Gary Turrell, knew I was looking for a car, and he found an owner, and we got connected with Danny Peace, and we built the white 8D car in Sioux Falls at Brian Chenet's shop, my brother-in-law's shop. And the next year we won a lot of races, all the big races again.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about that because that was also the year that the World of Outlaws had a split. And there was the USA and the World of
Yeah,
Outlaws. And you guys, if I remember correctly, you didn't commit to either one. You guys chased the money.
we decided between ourselves that instead of joining World of Outlaws or the USA, which the USA group was Steve Kinzer, Sammy Swindell, Dave Blaney, basically split off, and then whoever wanted to go. It's kind of like High Limit now.
Yep.
Uh, they went their way, and the World of Outlaws went there. Well, World of Outlaws had made a lot of racetracks, a lot of money, so they got, including all the big tracks, Eldora Speedway, Knoxville, Williams Grove. It was hard for the USA group to get tracks to sanction them. They had a hard time, but they did have some good races. So we just decided to not join in any of them and just race the biggest race of the weekend, no matter where it was, whether it was USA, World of Outlaws, or non-sanctioned at all, and go with it. And that's what we did.
You had a great crew that year also because I believe was Robert Hubbard also
Yeah.
another one of your mechanics that
Robert
year.
Hubbard was a mechanic along with Gary Deuce Terrell.
Yeah. And the two of them rolled up and down the road. And that team, and I think that's when people started, well, not, I don't want to put it that way, but it's amazing that you were building your own cars at the time. And I want to talk a little bit about that because Brian Schnee, who's your brother-in-law, is still building competitive race cars to this day. And I think you getting involved with your program might have helped propel him along and was a good opportunity for you to get your stuff going too. Tell me where I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong, other than the fact that you know at the time Brian was just a kid just getting started, and that's what he wanted to do, is build race cars. And so I could see myself that was going to be good for me because the stuff was right there in town, and I could keep an eyeball on it, how it was being built. It was going to be built my way or it wasn't going to be built. And I had, you know, more than 1,000 races under my belt. So I had a distinct idea how I wanted stuff, and it worked perfectly because Brian really didn't know. A he didn't have a preconceived idea how it should be built. So he'd do it how I wanted it done. And we lucked out together. I mean, he built me great race cars, and I won a lot of races, and he became Sprint Car Builder of the Year that year, put him on the map. But he
Yeah.
would have been put on the map anyway because he's one of the premier uh, chassis fabricators in the country. So he would have made it anyway. It might not have been that fast, but he'd have made it.
Yeah. In 1989, just for comparison, how many race cars did you and Deuce and Brian put together to start the year? Did you build 2 or 3, or how many
I,
did you have?
no, I think we built two is all. And then
Okay.
I think we may have ended up with three, I think, but I'm not sure. That's a long time ago, and a lot of things changed since then. But nowadays they go through 4 or 5 cars easy a year.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. The reason I asked was it seems like, how everybody, if you're in the racing community around here, and in 1989 I was probably still in college, but I was a professional fan. I was one of those guys that got smarter as the night went on in the grandstands and could tell everybody what was going on. But we heard that you guys had shipped a couple cars, and was your shop for the 8D car right in Sioux Falls, or was it somewhere else?
No, it was in Memphis, Tennessee, and
Yeah,
that's where Deuce and Robert are from. And but we build them here in town, the chassis and all the parts and stuff, and then
yeah.
they would come up here and get them and take them down there and paint them and assemble them and all that.
Well, I think they took the first two down in a U-Haul truck, if I remember right. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it does, but I don't know for sure, but you probably
Yeah.
know more about that than I do.
I do, because I was working at the U-Haul Center here in Sioux Falls during that time.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
yeah, but I didn't. I probably didn't know what was going on at the time. Anyway, just a quick sidebar there. But
yeah.
but I know that my first ever trip to Eldora Speedway was in 1989. I want to say also, and you guys were blistering fast that year, and I was a big Doug Wolfgang fan, and you and Sammy got into a bad deal on the front stretch that night, probably only about 5-6 laps into that A main, and I think you pretty much, in my words, you probably had to write that car off, and I'm not sure. That's the reason I asked how many cars you had that year.
I think we did. I think we did write that car off that night. I'm pretty sure it was junk because they go
Yeah,
fast at Eldora Speedway anyway. And we were. Sammy was leading at the time, and I was running second, and I was going to win the race. We were just faster at that point of the year. We were going
yeah,
to win the race, and we split a lap car, and I can't remember what happened. The lap car wiggled one way or the other. No, no, no
yeah.
offense to him, but and then we got together, and it messed us both up.
Oh yeah, I did. And
And I
anyway,
think because of that, I think we had a brand new car a couple weeks later at the Knoxville Nationals.
yeah. Okay, and that makes sense to me too. Like I didn't know. I didn't back then. We didn't have the internet, so we didn't know a lot of stuff
Right.
either. But it helped that you were right here in Sioux Falls, and it's where I grew up too. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that year is probably like one of the best years you ever had. I think what I read, you guys made over 500 grand in prize money alone in 1989. And if you look at the purses back then compared to now, you guys were raking it in, man.
Well, I think I'm not exactly sure because it's been so long ago, but I think we averaged $5,200 a take a night, and we raced around 100 races.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I
so
can believe that. So
so we did okay. Yeah.
absolutely. So there was speculation about that team at all. Anything you want to talk about? Was it was a 1 year deal only, and then you were on to something else?
Well, what happened was Danny was a young boy, a 20-year boy from San Angelo, Texas, that was a huge sprint car fan, just like you were, like I was as a kid.
Yep.
And he'd go to Devil's Bowl Speedway all the time when he could over in Dallas and around the state where they ran them, which there wasn't a lot of sprint cars in Texas. Texas is a big state. So he decides he's gonna go to Dallas and look around for a job, I think, and and he met a girl in Dallas, or I think Arlington actually, which is just Dallas, Arlington, Fort Worth, same town. But
Yep.
anyway, uh, he meets a girl there who's a who's a fairly successful real estate lady at the time, and I don't know all the logistics of what happened, but she falls in love with him, and a couple weeks later he decides, well, this is cool, but I got to get a job, and I gotta go somewhere. Well, do something. And she said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I want to be a sprint car owner. He didn't want to be a driver. He wanted to own one, but I got to get a job first. Well, she had enough money that she loaned him some money, or gave him some money, or had a business that was supporting it. He he decides he's going to put a race team together. And about this time, he knows, because he lives in the South. He's been to Memphis and Little Rock and Dallas and stuff. He hears through the grapevine that Deuce Turrell's trying to put a team together, and how much it would take to put that team together. They have it all itemized down for the whole year. So he decides he can do that. Well, they need to hire a driver. Well, Deuce wanted me to drive it. So they come to me the last race of the season, wherever it was. Uh, Not the last race, actually. It wasn't the last race, but it was they came to me at Manzanita Speedway, and I had just run over Mark Kinser's right rear tire and flipped it out of the ballpark. Stupid mistake I made. And I thought I was going to win doing it. I mean, I thought I was going to win, but I made a mistake, flipped it out. My knee was swelled up like a basketball, and they come into my motorhome afterwards and tell me they got this deal going, and would I be interested in driving them, and if driving for it, if so, how much? So I told him what I wanted to drive, 50% of what the race car brought in, $1,000 a week, because I thought it was a joke. This kid wasn't even old enough to shave yet. They're wasting my time.
Yeah.
So I said, I want 1,000 a week plus 50% to drive. And I want the cars. I want John Singer of Tipton, Missouri to build the motors. And I want Brian Chenet at home to build the cars. And if it's not that way, I'm not interested. So they left. And Deuce found me later in the pit area that night. And he said, boy, you really hit him hard, didn't you? And I said, well, Deucey, I just thought that if this guy's a joke, that he's wasting our time, I might as well say, might as well hit him hard, because if he's a joke, he's not going to do it anyway. Well, a couple weeks later, the final race of the year was a race. It wasn't even World of Outlaws. Maybe it was USA. I can't even remember it. USA was starting for the next year that fall.
Yes.
Okay. So they had 4 races in the fall. And the last race was at Devil's Bowl Speedway in Dallas. And I think I passed Steve Kinser on the last lap to win it. And I'm up there in the front, doing the interview and all that. And Jerry and my girls are with me. And we're getting ready to go ahead and drive back home to Sioux Falls to get them back to school. I don't know if we drove all night or if we got up early the next morning. I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. We were all together, and Deuce comes to me and he said, well, we're on. I said, we're on what? And he said, we're going somewhere tomorrow to buy the truck and trailer, and I'll meet you at Singer's on Wednesday in Tipton, Missouri, and we'll go over the plans for the motor and get a couple motors bought. I said, really? And he said, yep, we're on. I said, okay. So I went back home, called Brian and told him what was happening. Brian rode with me down to Tipton, Missouri. We got it all squared away. And, the next spring and by February, we were ready to roll again. So
Yeah.
That's how that
So,
was.
yeah. So, all right. That's good info on that one. I just, moving on. I got to jump next page here. 1990, Jay Williams, the 8 car. I believe that was the orange 8 car that you drove out of California.
Yeah.
And you guys, I think you won the King's Royal that year, came back and won that. I don't know how your year was, except I'm pretty sure the Knoxville Nationals, you got crashed on your qualifying night in the heat race. And that was the year of the alphabet, I think.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So back then, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. You know, the Williams car is a good piece, and I don't know who you had working on it that year. Did Deuce jump with you to that one also?
Yeah, so did Robert Hubbard.
Yeah. So you had Deuce and Hubbard again that year,
Yeah.
and back then, our younger generation doesn't know, but you know they complain about inverting 8 cars into heat races at the Knoxville Nationals now, and they used to invert 10.
10.
So I know you were coming off the back row and you never made it to turn 1. What do you remember about that deal and how important it was because it was a qualifying night with no do-overs?
I don't I I know what happened. Uh a guy got messed up in front of me and I was coming too fast and couldn't miss him and hit him and I didn't turn over, but it destroyed that race car. And it hit so hard it broke the engine and everything, the block and the whole
Oh
thing.
yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
that was a write off there then.
right. We had another race car, but we didn't even really have a good motor at the time. Our other motors were weren't ready to win. So Earl Garrity loaned us a motor. We put in this new car, and we won the qualifying night, which started you in the back of the D main, I think, at that time. I
Yeah.
think I was in the D. I can't really remember.
No, well, hang on. I can because I thought I got to get ready for this, and I actually watched a few snippets today. Actually, for the non-qualifiers night on Friday night, you were leading the A main, and the rear end broke.
Oh, that's what
That's
happened.
what, yeah, and that's what got you into the D main. Otherwise, you'd
D
have been in a
main,
little bit
yeah.
better shape.
Okay,
So
that's
then you
right.
guys had to come back, change rear end and drive line and all that stuff, and then you started. I have it right here. You started 6th in the D main, and I think Jeff Swindell was in there with you in the blue 4A car,
Yeah.
and you got through that one fairly. You know, I don't know if you'd call it easy. It was funny because they were able to interview you between everyone. And I know the only reason I chuckled about that when I was looking at that was, heck, you only get 6 minutes between a B main, a C main, and a B main anymore. And you had time to get out and, you know, do your helmet, and you had the guys doing stuff, and you were thinking about your adjustments. But the main thing I wanted to point out was,
Well, the reason they did that way then was like when the D main was running, or let's say get done, they
yeah,
were they were hot lapping the B main cars.
oh yeah, that's right,
So,
yeah,
and then as the C main was over, they were hot lapping the A main or something in that order.
yeah, that's right. No,
So
you're
I
right. So
had
that's
enough
what, yeah.
time in between to catch my breath and think a little bit.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask you because you were just as good as your own mechanic as Deuce, I would say. You knew what you wanted in a car. You're one of those guys that wasn't just a driver. You could work on them and you could tell what was going on in each corner of your car and each corner of the racetrack and what you wanted to do to fix it.
Well, I think it became important the longer my career went. You had to understand what was going on, or you were only going to win, you know, once in a while. If you could, the more you understood about your cars, the more you could dial them in to be perfect. And the truth is, Steve, Sammy, amongst others, were probably as good or better than I was driving. They were at least equal, if not better. I'd say those two were better, and I might have been okay. I was equal with the rest of the guys, but those two were better drivers. So I had to buckle down and learn how to make my car as perfect as I could make it for me to get the most out of the race car. And then I would have a chance of beating those guys.
Well, I think I think you did a pretty good job of doing that, and I just knew that you were always very much involved, hands on your race car because you understood. You were probably the first one that understood shocks, you know, the importance of that, torsion bars, spring rates, and things like that. I mean, heck, even after you were done racing, and I get to hang out with you on Sunday nights just for a quick conversation at Houston's, you taught me a lot of stuff just that you never, until you actually think it through, you don't know that. And that's where I think you've been exceptional for other people coming up in the ranks, and you being able to sit down and visit with people and explain it.
Well, like I said, I had a lot. By the time I got injured, I probably had close to 2,000 starts. So you're going to learn something. When you really consider it, if a season at Houston Speedway is 17 nights, and I went, 15 to 18 years, I think, over 100 nights a year, over,
Yeah.
100 being the least. It's like them guys. I still have guys call me and they say, what do you remember most about winning 55 main events with Weikert's Livestock? And I said, losing 100. And they say, what do you mean? I said, well, we start 150 main events or whatever it was. I don't exactly know the number, but if you can't win 55 out of 150 starts, you ain't worth a damn anyway.
Yeah,
It's just the way it is. So you learn a lot, is what I'm saying. You learn from trial and error method. Whereas a guy out here at Houston's loses a race, and it's a week later before he comes back again, then he loses the second one in a row. He hasn't really put together what caused him to lose the first one, because they switched a bunch of stuff around. Then he loses the second one, and they're lost by. Whereas if you lose one, you race 4 or 5 more times before you come back to that place again. You've pretty much went through the gamut of what works, what don't work, why it did work or why it didn't work. It takes a season out here to learn that. So
yeah,
nothing. These guys do a great job.
exactly. So going back to that night at Knoxville where we were, and how we jumped off here was they interviewed you, they said, what do you need to do to your car? Because you said we needed to get faster. They said, well, what is that? And you said, I don't know. I got to think about it while I'm putting on tear-offs here, and then we'll see how we do that. What I took from that was you were in constant communication with Deuce and Hub on what we have to do from the D main to the C main to the B main as the track was slowing down. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, it's an exact assumption. Those guys did the work and made a lot of the decisions themselves, but also they weren't sitting in it like I was. I was sitting in it. I could tell exactly, what it was doing, whether it was going into the corner and not turning and not cutting, or if it was cutting too early, or if it was spinning the tires coming off, or whatever it was doing. Then we have to decide between the three of us what the best way to correct what the biggest problem I had was.
Would you guys say you were pretty much spot on the whole night on that?
I I don't remember. It's been so long ago. All I know, what I do remember about it was we had straight exhaust pipes on that car. And when we borrowed that motor from Earl Garrity, it had a different cam in it, and it was running the exhaust temperature so much hotter. It must have had the cam timing different than what we ran. And it was burning me up inside the cockpit. The fumes were coming inside, and it wasn't fumey, it was just so hot.
Temperature
And
hot.
yeah,
Okay.
temperature hot. And it was almost hot enough to blister the back of my legs. So it was very uncomfortable driving. And I remember for the feature, they finally richened it up a little bit just so it would cool the exhaust temperature down a little bit. But I don't know if it did or not. And I'm not even sure that's exactly what we did, but I know that we were already trying to compensate for something that we shouldn't have been compensating for. I should have
I
had a
hear you.
different set of headers on it or something.
So 1990 was a spectacular Knoxville Nationals. And I just want to tell everybody, because not only did we have you coming from the D main to the C main to the B main, and then even, I would say to an extent, having a shot at the A main. If you get a late yellow or two, I honestly think you don't know you're going to win the race, but I think you got a chance. But you've got Bobby Allen and Sammy Swindell, and Sammy can't see because his shield's all oiled up, and Bobby's running the bottom like he is, and they end up the crowd couldn't have got more of their money's worth that night between what you did and how the race ended. It's just probably one of the best nationals ever.
Oh, I think it was a lot of fun for people. I know that. I had a lot of people tell me that. It was actually a lot of fun for me because I'd had known by that time I knew Bob for probably 15 years, and Bobby Allen, and I was really really glad and proud that he got to win that race.
Yeah,
He's
and that
one of the real true racers in the United States, and still is for that matter. He helps his grandson and his son now, race yet, and he's Bob's 82 or 3 years old. He's about 10 years older than me.
is there anybody from back, in your racing days that you do stay in contact with? Bobby Allen, probably if he's in the neighborhood, but anybody else from, and no disrespect here when I say your era, but ultimately we're all gradually going to get older as life goes on. But do you have somebody that you are able to reach out to or you stay in touch with?
Uh, a lot of those guys, we all lived in different places. And we
Yeah.
all, when the racing was done, we'd go home and be with our friends and what have you. We're regular people too. And Sioux Falls was a long ways away from it's good for racing, but nobody lived here at the time. There was no real, so I would have to say the only person I really talked to, and it isn't it's not weekly by no means.
Yeah.
Maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year would be Dave Blaney.
Oh, okay.
I like Dave for a long time and kept in contact with him even through his NASCAR career and now his son's career. And so he'd be one. I mean, I still talk to the other guys a little bit. I talk to Sammy if I see him at the track. I call Steve maybe one time a year. Every other year, we talk on the phone for a little bit.
Yeah.
And another one I'm friends with, but I don't talk to all the time, is Keith Kaufman out
Yeah.
in Pennsylvania.
And he
Uh,
was a heck of a racer too.
he was
So
a hell of a racer.
yeah.
Uh, I have the utmost respect for him. And I guess that really those competitors were, it's just guys. All of them. You're friends with all of them, but when you leave the racetrack, you went home to your own home. And
Yeah.
in my case, I was married before most of those guys were, and had kids, so it wasn't like I could take off and go drink beer for a week and then show back up at the racetrack. I had stuff I had responsibilities and things that I don't know if it was responsibility. I just I had a family.
Yeah.
And
And I
we lived quite a ways away from the hub of auto racing. If you call Indianapolis or Indiana the middle of the country, that was quite a ways away for us.
yeah, it was. So we get through 90 and you had a hell of a run at Knoxville and then after that year 1990 I want to say, did you get back together with, I don't know if it's getting back together because I don't remember, were you with Max Rogers then?
No, not in 1990. I drove that Payless
Yeah.
hardware car. Well,
Yeah. And
they I can't really remember what the deal was on that. At the end of the year, they kind of decided that they maybe didn't want to run World of Outlaws, or Hubbard and Deuce quit or something. And I just didn't,
yeah.
I just decided I didn't want to drive that car anymore. Well, I knew that Max Rogers used John Singer engines, which I had in
Okay.
8D and the Payless hardware car. And so I called Max up. He's a farmer from down here by Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I called Max myself and I said, Max, I want to race, but I'm at the age now where my daughter's going to graduate from high school, my oldest one, and I don't want to run the entire circuit every weekend, but I want to run a lot yet, but I will miss a couple of races. Is there any way we can race together? And He said, yeah. He said, actually, he raced at Knoxville and just the area of Iowa where he lived, but he was getting to the point where he had rented out a bunch of his ground farming wise, and he was getting ready to retire from some of that, but he was wanting to go out and race a little more. So it ended up to where we got together and we raced together in 91 and in 92 until I got burned.
Yeah. And Max Rogers was always a great contributor to the sprint car world around here too. So
Yeah.
want to jump in a little bit and talk about that a little bit. 1992, people might not realize Lakeside Speedway down by Kansas City was a pavement track. And the World of Outlaws I think you guys were getting ready to have one of your first ever pavement races sanctioned by the World of Outlaws when you get into a bad deal and you get in the fire deal. And tell me just a little bit about what you remember from that day and how it affected you moving forward.
Well, I don't remember nothing from that day, uh, or for 6 weeks afterwards.
Okay.
But I do know how we got ready to go there. We were going to go to Eldora Speedway in Bloomington, Indiana, because actually, from Max's house over by Cedar Rapids, it was 6 or 7 hours over there to run those two dirt races, which our
Yep.
car was set up to run dirt, and that's mostly all we ran. So we didn't run for World of Outlaw points either at that point. So we weren't going to go to Kansas City. The promoter called me on the phone about on Tuesday and told me that they didn't have that many advance sale tickets sold. And he thought that if he could get me to come to that track, that I was a big enough name in the Midwest area that he could then sell it out, or however you want to say that, sell more tickets. So I said, well, we're going to go somewhere else, but what would you pay us to come? And he said, well, we'll give you a couple motel rooms, and I think it was $2,000 just to come. So I told Max that, called Max and told him, and I said, but you make up your mind. I don't care where we go. You know, I said, we had a long arm car a reverse arm car, which doesn't have really enough spring rate to really run blacktop right. But I was friends with Jeff Gordon's dad, John Bickford, and I knew that John and them had run sprint cars on pavement a lot. And it wasn't going to be hard to figure out how we could get our car semi close. And Hoosier Tire sponsored us anyway, so we could get whatever Hoosiers we needed. And so Max said, well, he said, I guess $2,000 covers expenses for sure, especially when you don't have to buy no tires and what have you. So we stiffened our cars up with some coilover springs on some shock absorbers on the right side, and we went down there, and it to this day it kind of makes me mad when I think about it, because I went down there for $2,000 when I could have went over to Bloomington, Indiana, and Eldora Speedway for two 4,000 to win races. So my share would have been 8,000 anyway, or I would have won eight
Yeah.
maybe anyway, and my share would have been four anyways. And I probably was going to win them both. I mean, in my mind, I probably was going. We were fast, and we'd already won, I think, 8 out of 9 starts that spring. And I went down to Kansas City and we were practicing, and I don't remember what happened, but I think I touched the inside guardrail, flattened the left front tire, and went across the racetrack and hit it at a 45-degree angle at about 130 mile an hour, and it just blew up, and it was on a full load of fuel, because we had already practiced earlier in the day on qualifying levels of fuel, lower levels. So I wanted to try it on a full load of fuel and see what it felt like. And it hit the wall so hard it severed off the bottom number 12 line out of the fuel tank. It severed it off, and it was just siphoning a full 3/4 inch line of fuel right down underneath the car. and it was on blacktop. So when it's going, it was throwing the sparks out the back a long ways until it slowed down to a stop, and it went off. Luckily, it was pointed down towards the bottom of the bank, and the fire actually didn't burn right on me, but it got everything so hot it caught the rear tires on fire. The center section of the rear end was magnesium, caught it on fire, and it just burned it. It took, I can't remember how long exactly, but it was like 8 or 9 minutes before they could get the fire out totally.
And Mark Kinzer and Steve Beitler, I think, were two of the guys that were a huge part in getting you out of that mess.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, for those that don't know, is you were burned, I think, over 30% of your body. I think you broke your neck in that accident, if I remember right, and some things like that. A long, painful recovery. And at some point, do you decide? Go ahead. You got something you want to throw in there?
No.
Okay. At some point, at that point, are you thinking, I'm done racing? Or you're thinking, maybe not saying I'm done racing, maybe you're thinking there's no chance I can race again. Once you realize the full magnitude of what happened in that crash, what's your mindset as you're trying to get your body healed up?
Well, for one thing, my wife was about 8 months and a week pregnant with Robbie at the time. So he was real close to being born. And when I hit the wall and got burned, I also split my sternum, broke my pelvis, uh, broke shin bones on my legs, and I got a bunch of burns, 58% burns on my body, of which I think 35 or 40% were fourth degree, where it goes all the way through the skin and burns the bones and underlying muscle tissue. So I got burnt pretty good. So,
Yeah.
but I also hit my head, and I had a head injury. So it takes me, I'm between drugs and everything else. I don't remember nothing for 6 weeks. So when I wake up, and the morning I wake up, it'd be May 12th in the morning, Jerry had Robbie that night. Well, I wake up on May 11th, and she had him on May 12th at 1 or 2 in the morning. So I woke up the day before he was born. That's the first thing I can remember. But the next thing I remember was looking at myself every day when they'd put me in that uh, cattle tank to scrub. You get all the bacteria out of you and all the dead skin off you and all the dead stuff. I never once thought in my mind that I was going to die. Never even thought it. I knew I was going to live, but I could tell by looking at myself that I'd be lucky to race again. So what I was never mad about not being able to race at the hospital. Later I used to get mad thinking about it, but I want to race. I want to do this. I love racing. Not only did it pay me dang good money, but I like to do it.
Yeah.
But at the time in the hospital, I think I knew that I was going to be lucky to live, to be right. And then my son was born. It was my first. We have 3 daughters that are older than before him. He's the first son I had, and I couldn't even hold him for 2 more weeks. They wouldn't let him come in to where I was because they thought he would make me sick, not me make him sick.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yep.
I couldn't hold him for 2 more weeks yet, and so I kind of realized that as far as racing, being a championship race car driver, it was probably over. I kind of knew that.
So the mindset is, do you think your racing career is over, or do you think that you making a very good living is over? Do you still want to race? Let's put it that way.
Oh yeah, I wanted to race. I wanted to race all along, but you know what I mean is by the time you're 39, you realize that, I, you know, how many halfbacks have you seen on TV blow their knees out because somebody tackled them and they come back, but they're never the same. They're all
Yeah.
right, but never the same. Well, I kind of realized right away that it was going to be luck if I came back. And I wasn't really even thinking about it. I was trying to learn how to walk, which they told
Yeah.
me they told me at first I would maybe never walk again. I might not have feet, but I'm okay. I mean, I'm not perfect by no means, but it burnt the heck out of my feet. And it just took a lot of surgeries and a lot of time and a lot of effort to be able to do that, to
Yeah.
walk again.
Yeah, and that is it's a miracle, and we're very lucky to have you around still. I just remember how big a news that was back then. And the one thing that it didn't get that I noticed is never ever changed. I was lucky enough to know you before that. Your personality, you're a very kind, outgoing person, and you're very witty, and none of that ever changed. And that's just been a great trait that I've always thought about you, Doug.
I never thought of it that way, but thank you.
Yeah, you're fine. So anyway, not just anyway after that, but you actually did make a comeback, and I want to say it was over in Jackson, Minnesota, probably over a year later in 1993. Is that right?
Uh, it was at what they called the Jackson Nationals, and
Okay.
it would have been 93. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and I tried to come back. Actually, I tried to come back for the start of World of Outlaws with Max Rogers' car, and we went to Houston, Texas, and it didn't take me but one night to realize that I wasn't near up to it yet. I just wasn't. I wasn't. I'd lost, I got out of the hospital weighing 130 pounds, and I was in the hospital for near 4 months, and it just I got out whenever it was, July, I think, or close, or sometime in July, and and I and I couldn't really even walk yet very good. And by fall time, I was starting to walk okay. So I started going to the gym and trying to, pump iron and work out and ride bikes or whatever I could do at the gym. And I started getting a little bit stronger, and I started going 2 times a day to the gym then, and I got a little stronger. And I thought, man, I think I can do this again. I really do. And so I really started ramping it up. And then everybody goes to Florida racing, and I'm not quite, in February, end of January and February, I'm not quite ready. But then by March time, I'm thinking and Max had his car ready, had the race car ready, and everything was the same, as it was. And I thought, well, we'll go down there and run Houston, Dallas, and I don't know where else they run down there at the time. And I only went one night, and we went back up to Dallas, and we are working on the race car. And Max asked me, he said, "Truthfully, what do you think?" And I said, "I truthfully don't think I'm ready yet." And he said, "Well, I don't either. So maybe we ought to just go home and get stronger and figure it out." So we did that. It's only the middle of March, end of March maybe. So I go rest of March, April, and May. And by June, I started going out to Brian's shop and trying to help him a little bit, mostly to help myself, but help weld for him. And at first, I couldn't weld for over an hour. And then I come back the next day and make an hour and a half. And the fourth day, I'd make 2 hours. And next week, I'd maybe make 3 hours, 2 or 3 days a week. Well, I got to where I got a little stronger. And in the meantime, a guy here in town, Ron Tisdall, he had 2 race cars, and he had Greg Gunnarsson driving, and Greg owned them, I part of them. They had Greg drove one, and they had another one. He asked me, "Would you want to go over to Jackson at the Jackson Nationals and and try racing again?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I would." He said, "Well, come out to the shop." He lived right out by my house near. He said, "Come out to the shop and we'll put it together the way you want it put together, and then we'll go." And so we did, and I don't really remember the race much other than I think I lucked out. I know I won, but I don't think it was me dominating in a, at a World of Outlaw caliber driver. A few guys dropped out and I happened to be all right and win it. So,
Yeah. So you, if I remember right, 1994. Did you get together with the modders for a little bit there?
no, when I drove Tisdall's car in 93.
Yep.
After that, I drove for Phil Durst a couple times in
That's
the
right.
end of
Yep.
93, and we went to Florida in 94. And in the meantime, it got to the point where the insurance companies were fighting from, not paying my medical bills. And so, and I had an insurance policy and the track had one. And so it got to the point where it was going to be, I was going to have to take care of myself one way or the other, or I was going to owe a couple $1,000,000. And that's just the way it was. So we thought about it, and it wasn't just the money. What happened to me, I thought was not right. There could have been a better way to have that handled, a better safety crew, a better crew involved. And so we filed a lawsuit against uh, the insurance, the racetrack and the sanctioning body, their insurance companies, to you know and one of the reasons why we did the racetrack was to make it, World of Outlaws was to make it better for a lot of other people. Well, we won the lawsuit, but it was in the state of Kansas, which had recoverability capacities in, voted in by law. So you couldn't win a lawsuit and get 20 million or nothing like that. They had in each category that you were suing in, lost wages, medical expenses, and what have you. You could only get a certain amount of money, which happened to be a little over 1 million, of which 1,200,000 or something like that, of which then right away what do you call that when they want to redo the lawsuit? File
Oh, on appeal.
Yeah, they
They
appealed it
appealed it.
right away because they
Yep.
lost it. The jury was in favor of me, so we won the lawsuit. But the most you could get was 1,250,000, which that's a lot of money. But I mean, but I mean, it doesn't pay for all the bills, and
Yeah.
plus the lawyers get 40% right off the top. That's fair. You won because they did a good job of presenting why you should win. So it goes into appeal, and a couple years later, and in the meantime, when this all happened, I had to step away from racing. It was too much. They wanted me to, for one thing, and I wasn't a professional racer no more yet anyway. So it wasn't like I was making a ton of money or nothing. I wasn't. So in the meantime, I quit racing in the spring of 94, and the trial was in the summer of 95, and it lasted I think 3 weeks in Kansas City. And we win it, and they appeal it, so it takes another year for the appeal process to get over, but we win, so I get 1,300,000 about, and the first thing, you got to pay your bills right off the top. So it took 100,000 to get it to court, out of pocket expenses for the lawyers and all that, and plus they
Yep.
got 40%. So that meant there was 500,000 or 600,000 left for me and Jerry. But it also forced the insurance companies to pay my medical expenses, and so we were good that way. So we went on with the red, and in the meantime, I had started a shop to, because it's the only thing I knew what to do at that time. I'm 40 years old or 41 by then, and the only thing I'd ever done was hang around race cars and drive them. Well, the driving was probably mostly over, so we just got a shop together, and I started repairing cars locally here, and build a few for guys that wanted newer cars, and did a lot of repair work, and as time went on, it got to be 1996, and they had this class of cars out here around the Midwest called IMCA, which were 360 motors or something like that, and a certain tire. Well, it was a pretty cheap class for those days, and I just decided to build one of those cars and race it locally to see if I could race yet, in case I wanted
That's
to
right.
again.
Yep.
And we won 22 times out of 32 starts, I think. So I think I was okay with the IMCA thing. And so about that time, Dan Motter, who had Stevie Smith driving before Stevie Smith kind of went off or whatever it was, I can't remember what the deal was. So he just he was always a big fan of mine. So he asked me if I wanted to go race, and I said, I don't think I'm ready for World of Outlaws yet, but I wouldn't mind trying it at Houston's on Sunday night and Knoxville on Saturday nights every weekend, and then wherever else we could go for a special once in a while on Wednesday or nights or whatever. So we did that, and I think I ended up winning 11 or 12 times that summer, and then at the end of the year, I got into a crash down at Granite City, Illinois, at a uh, all-star race, and a guy blew a tire in front of me, and I went over his tire, or when he slowed down,
Yeah.
spun around, another guy hit me, took the roll cage off that thing, and it broke my neck again. I broke my neck when I got burned, and it broke it again. At that time, they took me into the hospital, and the doctor said, I can see this is the second time you broke your neck. And by this time, I'm 45 years old or so. Whatever I was, 44 or 45. And they take me into the hospital, and 3 or 4 hours later, the guy said, well, I can see you broke your neck before. Maybe you just should decide that this is not, this is not conducive to you anymore. And I said, Doc, I already decided that after laying on that bed, and my wife and kids are there, my daughters are crying, and I just said, I I think I'm okay driving now. And I won. I drove Mark Birch's 360 car from Lincoln, Nebraska, and we won several races with that thing. In fact, I won one the night before I got burned, or got into an accident and got burned. I won the night before or the weekend before it, at Lincoln, Nebraska, in his car. It, I was
Yep.
just starting to really feel good again in it, like the old Doug Wolfgang. And
Yeah.
but I know laying on that bed that night, strapped that gurney, and realizing that I couldn't feel nothing for a while and slowly come back, that probably my days of race driving was over, and it has been.
Yeah. But moving on to the business, the Wolfwell chassis business, and that took off there for quite a while there, and you built some really nice cars there. And the one thing that was unique about your cars for the longest time was, even when the down tubes started, yours were non-down tube cars. And I think there was a reason for that, safety wise, wasn't there, in your mind?
Well, it wasn't so much the safety part of it, is what I was used to building them, and or driving them anyway. And I thought they had a little advantage driving them. So I built my cars with the roll cages that went down to the bottom frame rail, and I thought they were safer that way. But you know what? The down tube cars are really, really nice built cars. In fact, I built down tubes there at the end All
Yeah.
of them are built that way, and they should be. They completely encapsulate the driver, and it's a better deal because no
Yeah.
matter the racing's getting safer by the day. Safety equipment's come a long ways. There's a lot of rules for this or that. It's getting safer by the day, but don't kid yourself. These things are, especially the 410 sprint cars, when they got 900 horsepower, 950 horsepower, and they weigh 1,400 pounds, they are dangerous cars to drive, especially when you're a young guy, you have never been hurt, you don't have the fear of God in you at all. They can hurt you bad if you do something wrong. So they're dangerous.
And we just saw that, unfortunately, out at Eldora Speedway here just a couple of weeks ago. Between that was just a tough week for everybody. So I think the safety aspect has come a long ways, but I agree with you that sometimes I don't think that some of the younger drivers have the respect of the equipment they're driving, not because they can just go out and wreck it, but of what it could do to them, and it would be
Yeah,
long term.
and I'm not cutting them down because I know when I was a young kid and I was coming up, I was hell bent for leather to go to Indianapolis, and I'd have done anything to win a race. Anything. It didn't. What the last thing on my mind was, oh, that could burn me, or oh, that might cause me to break my neck, or might cause me to get injured. Never thought about it. Only thing I wanted to do was go to the front.
Yeah, exactly. So the one thing that we talked about, that you talked about just a little bit ago, and was Robbie being born the same time you were going through your nasty accident, but you got the opportunity to raise your family, which was a blessing there after that accident. But then Robbie took a liking to the sprint cars too, and I know that he ended up racing a sprint car around here too. And as a father, how was that getting able to work with Robbie and the different aspects of those things?
Well, first of all, uh, he grew up around my race shop, and we had all the tools and the welders and the milling machines and lathes to build anything. But the first thing he really fell in love with was motorcycles, and
And that's right. Yep.
I like motorcycles anyway, and so just by chance. A motorcycle shop here in town had a warehouse out by my shop and had all kinds of motorcycles right across the street, dirt bikes. And so he
Yep.
was riding dirt bikes around when he was 6 and 7 years old. And to tell you the truth, his biggest love of racing was still motorcycles. He got a chance to drive sprint cars because he was my son, and some of the guys that owned cars or bought cars from me watched him ride motorcycles, and he won a lot of motorcycle races, and they thought, man, he'll be a good race car driver. Well, he got a chance to drive them, but truthfully, his first love was motorcycles, where mine was cars. I like motorcycles, and I always liked riding them, and I love working on them. In fact, I used to be a motorcycle mechanic when I first got married, but uh, so he got a chance just because he was around my shop and had worked all the machinery and hung around, you know, and and I thought, well, if he at that time there was a lot of 360 cars around Sioux Falls, and he got a shot to drive one of them, and I thought, well, if he wants to drive, which he did, and I knew from my own experience. There's no sense in me not being involved in it because if he wants to, he's going to do it no matter what. So I might as well get involved with him a little bit. So I got involved and helped him a little bit here and at the track. But he never really he got to the point where he went to Knoxville and run a few races at Knoxville, and he realized that to really be good, you got to travel and run the big circuits and get in with a bunch of good mechanics. And by that time, I'm closing 50, 50, 55 years old, and I'm not wanting to go every weekend. I got other kids and grandkids, and uh and so he just decided in his own way that he had a girlfriend, they were going to get married, he was going to get a regular job and have kids. And he's doing well. So he just quit. You know, he'd done all he could do at a local level. He would have to make the jump, and he just wasn't willing to make that jump, which I don't blame him. It's a different
I don't either.
lifestyle.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, last thing I just want to ask you about real quick is, how often do you get to a racetrack anymore? Do you even go? Is it anything that interests you anymore or not?
I'm interested in it. I pay attention all the time as much as I can. I'm really interested in Ryan Blaney racing NASCAR just because I'm friends with Dave and Ryan. But I pay attention. I don't read, I don't have internet. I don't even know how to turn on a computer. I can barely use my phone to call, to call Doug Clark on the phone. So it's not like I'm scrolling my phone for an hour every day getting race results. But since Robbie quit about 10 years ago, I still went because I had, but I sold my business about 8 years ago, and I still went a few times, and now I'm down to going about one time a year is all.
Yeah.
The last few
And
years.
and that's great. I'm so happy that you still have that opportunity to spend the time with your family and the grandkids and to just relax and enjoy this part of life.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm a lucky man. I get to do that. When I do go to the track, it's mostly because I want to see somebody like Bobby Allen or somebody that I know. And to be truthful with you, I don't know the younger kids racing. They know who I am and I know who they are, but I don't know them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Doug, I know it was we worked on this for about 3 months getting together, and I just appreciate you, like I said before, you taking some time to drive over here and meet me, sit down and visit with me about your career, your family, what you're doing now, and I just can't appreciate you enough for coming by and visit with me and let me share some of this with my listeners out there.
Yeah, no sweat.
Okay, everyone. So that was some great stuff from Doug Wolfgang there. I just want to remind everybody that I did shoot that last Wednesday, and of course, back here at my home studio now, getting ready to, actually got done editing it and finishing that up so I can get that out to you guys. Once again, I want to thank Todd Queering, Doug Johnson, everybody at Houston Speedway for letting us sit in at their place for a couple hours and have a lot of fun. It was good getting caught up. Some great stuff from Doug Wolfgang, and hopefully maybe you guys learned a little bit more about him that you did not already know. Like I said earlier, I am going to be down at Knoxville. If you see me, give me a wave, give me a shout out. Would love to meet all of you guys out there. Also, want to remind you, if you enjoy what I'm doing, if you enjoy what I'm putting out here, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that follow button, and hit that share button. Let's get this all out to as many people as we can. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll maybe see you down at Knoxville. Otherwise, we'll hopefully be right back here next week with some more great content. Thanks, everyone.